Hello, you're listening to Ending Physician Overwhelm, and I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a physician and a life coach for physicians and other professionals. In this podcast, we look at why, as physicians, we often get stuck in feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, and burnout, and how we can break out of toxic thought patterns. My hope is that each episode gives you an opportunity to heal and get more clear on how you want to show up in your life and your work. And now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the episode. Today, we're going to be talking about the Sunday Afternoon Scaries. But before we get there, I'd like to read a review that someone left on Apple Podcasts. So I see 5 wonderful stars here, and it says, I've listened to a few episodes and wondered how Dr. Mello knew exactly what I've been experiencing. I'm so grateful for this podcast as I'm working on self-reflection. Definitely subscribe and listen. So thank you so much, Dr. Catrice, for leaving me that kind review. Every time someone leaves a review and a rating, it helps the podcast to be found. And certainly for anyone who's experiencing problems with burnout or overwhelm or anxiety in their practice, it's really important that we have lots of different avenues to help us feel better. So thank you again for that review. Now, what we're going to be talking about today, again, is the Sunday Afternoon Scaries. And my alternative title is Why That Trip to Target Doesn't Really Help. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but walk with me along this path. So for anyone who doesn't know the term, Sunday Afternoon Scaries is that sensation that you feel when you are on the verge of starting back to work, or, certainly at some points in your life, starting back to school. So the Sunday afternoon part, or Sunday evening for some people, is, for people working a conventional Monday through Friday type schedule, which of course may or may not be you. But if you are a hospitalist, for example, maybe you work 7 days on, 7 days off, and you switch over on Tuesdays, then it would be Monday afternoon or evening scaries, right? If you work a conventional, Monday through Friday clinic, then Sunday afternoon would probably be the start. You get the idea. It's that anticipatory anxiety or worry or fear where even though you are not yet at work, you are still on your off time, you are feeling an unpleasant emotion, maybe really consciously or unconsciously, and of course, doesn't feel good. And how this used to look for me is that typically on Sunday afternoon, I would feel this incredible urge to go to Target or someplace similar. I would just want to kind of escape the house. And especially this was true when I had babies and toddlers. The weekends, of course, were intense, just, taking care of young children and trying to relax and recover from the work week. And by Sunday afternoon, of course, I was feeling pretty spent and frustrated, perhaps, that I didn't really relax as much as I would have liked to. And I just felt this urge to run away and go do something to help me feel better. And so for me, that would often be, a trip to Target or the drugstore. It would often involve some kind of sugary coffee drink. And in my mind, it was this really strong, compelling feeling that I really needed to do that to feel better. And at the time, I could be aware that I had the feeling, that I had that urge to go and do that. And frankly, it would feel pretty terrible at the time if I, couldn't do that for some reason, if we had something else planned, because in my mind, it wouldn't give me a little chance to, have a break or do something for myself before I started the work week. But I never really thought about it in more detail than that. I didn't really examine, why did I have this urge? I just kind of recognized that it would happen every week and generally would give into it. But, if we dial it back a little bit, we can really identify this as a very common behavior that pulls us off track. And of course, there is nothing wrong with going to Target. I love Target. I don't have any affiliation with Target professionally. It is my go-to for, I need this item, or I have a little bit of grocery shopping to do. And oh, look, I can get some clothes there. So it's as simple as that. You can insert your favorite store of choice. But really, when we dive into this behavior, it's really about changing the way that we are feeling. And the name for that can be many different things. Sometimes we call that buffering, where we're having an unpleasant emotion and we're trying to change it through some kind of external means. Some people would also call it numbing. Some people would call it distracting. And really, it's a coping strategy for these unpleasant emotions, right? We're trying to escape from these unpleasant emotions, often unconsciously. And what are those emotions? Commonly, it might be anxiety, boredom, disappointment, frustration, stress, right? Any number of things that we don't want to feel. And we may not really be consciously aware that we're feeling them. We just might feel kind of like, I don't want to just sit here. I want to go do something. And it's really common for us to reach for something that will temporarily sort of change that emotion for us. So, common example of this, of course, would be food or alcohol. And then, of course, it also gets into things like shopping, binging on Netflix, overworking, overcharting. For some people, certainly it would be gambling or, other sort of more nefarious addictions, if you will. And for most of these things, there's nothing inherently wrong with these choices, right? So food is something that we need. Alcohol, you could make a lot of arguments about, but in moderation, it can be a just fine choice. Shopping, presumably there are things that you need to purchase in order to exist, right? Is television inherently bad? No. But the issue here is that we are often using those things in order to change an emotion that we don't like and may not even be fully aware of. And often when we do that, the end result is not something that we want, right? So perhaps on those afternoons, I would go to Target. I might buy myself some things that I would, feel would sort of, change me for the better. Oh, like, I've got this new moisturizer that's going to make my skin better, or I've got a new outfit to wear, or something that would kind of distract me from the anxiety of starting another work week. And, if I had a sugary coffee drink, again, I would get a hit of dopamine. I would get a hit of pleasure from that. And, it got to be such a pattern, again, as I said, that I was really unhappy if I didn't do that. And I was also later feeling kind of bad, kind of unsettled. Look, I indulged in, more sugar than I want to be indulging in. And, I wanted to feel good, but I ended up buying things that I didn't really need, right? Again, trying to sort of change my state. And so ultimately the outcome is I still have the anxiety about starting the work week, and I've gone and spent money and, indulged in calories that I didn't really need. And those were kind of working against my goals, right? I didn't want to have a house full of a lot of stuff. I didn't want to be consuming that much sugar. And, ultimately, I don't really feel better. So these are really common experiences for many of us. And I'm sure if you and I could sit down and talk, there would be examples in your life that you could share with me about things that you do, either on a day-to-day basis or that come up at the beginning, of the work week, again, where you're sort of almost ruining your time off by anticipating the pain of the work week. And all of this is very normal, but there is an opportunity here for us to dig a little deeper into this scenario and figure out, for you, what would feel better? What would be a better choice, a better outcome that you would rather have than, choosing one of these behaviors in an attempt to sort of change your state and ultimately not having what you want. So again, let's talk about, the potential ways that you are doing this. So for a lot of people, it might be overeating. And I think especially of those of us who have gotten into the habit, especially once the kids are in bed, of going to the cupboards and eating all the snacks, right? Or, feeling like you need that, glass of wine or two or three at the end of your day, in order to cope with, the stresses and all of that. Right. So many things that we do that are numbing or buffering from feelings that we're having that we don't like. Another way that this tends to show up for physicians is overworking and overcharting. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we are having feelings of unworthiness, inadequacy, not feeling valued. And so we are spending a lot more time than is necessary on charts, trying to make them as picture perfect as possible, or, overdoing it on our performance in our inbox, writing really long responses to patients or to colleagues, and really trying to demonstrate our value with those activities. But the downside, of course, is spending a lot of time and a lot of mental energy doing those tasks and ultimately suffering for it, right? Ultimately, that's not feeding into your goal of, living a balanced life where you have time for work and you have time for rest, right? You're sort of violating your own boundary with that. And certainly, a frequent behavior that comes up on Sundays, right? I log in, I go into the inbox, I try and, really look ahead and anticipate all the problem spots as much as possible, trying to make the work week better. But really, I'm trying to get a hold of anxiety and trying to feel control over, something that is inherently a little bit unpredictable, right? If you work in an outpatient clinic, if you work in the hospital and you are logging in to see how many patients, the doctor who's going to be signing out to you has, you're really often trying to counter your anxiety by, gaining some control over the situation. And ultimately, you're sort of feeding the beast, as it were. So if any of this resonates, if you find yourself doing something like my Sunday afternoon trips to Target and ultimately being dissatisfied with the result, finding that you still have the emotion, the anxiety, the disappointment, the frustration, the stress, and you've also gone and done a behavior, especially one that ultimately doesn't work out for you, such as wasting a lot of time watching television that you didn't intend or scrolling on social media, eating food that you didn't intend and that you didn't really need, drinking more alcohol than you would like. And again, overworking, overcharting. If any of those things applies to you, I want you to, take this opportunity to really step back and do a little bit of reflection on what's going on. So, the first step in this process is really noticing the urge that you feel for the food, the alcohol, the shopping, Facebook, whatever that is for you. Notice the urge and notice it as many times as it seems to happen. This comes up a lot, of course, with, social media and our phones. We feel boredom for half a second and reach for our phone to fix it. So name the urge. Then, when you notice that the urge is happening, take a minute and think, what am I really feeling here? So urge is a feeling, but urge often is a result of something else going on. So, a thought or a feeling. You may be feeling anxious about the start of the work week, for example. You may be feeling disappointed that you didn't get as many things done on your weekend or your day off as you would have liked to. You may be feeling frustrated at something that your kids have been doing. Whatever it is, notice the urge and try to identify the feeling, especially if this is something that seems to happen on endless loop, like my Sunday afternoon Target runs. The next thing that I invite you to do is to really be kind to yourself. If you find yourself in this kind of a pattern, nothing has gone wrong. Our brains don't like negative emotions. They don't like feeling anxious, bored, disappointed, stressed, right? They're really good at noticing those emotions and wanting to get out of them as fast as possible. Nothing has gone wrong. So instead of being upset that you're feeling an urge or, trying to sort of white knuckle your way through it, can you turn to yourself with kindness and say, I notice that you're having an urge. I get it. I understand. It makes sense. It makes sense that you're worried about the start of your work week. I get it. It makes sense that you're feeling bored because maybe you haven't had any fun this weekend. It makes sense that you're disappointed because you thought you'd get all these things done and you haven't. So approaching yourself with kindness. And that's a skill that many of us have not yet developed, but here is an opportunity for you to practice. And then the final step in this process is asking yourself, what is another way I could take care of myself right now that doesn't necessarily involve giving into that urge? So if I notice that I feel anxious on a Sunday afternoon and I'm dreading the start of the work week, what is a kind and compassionate way that I can take care of myself, that I can notice and allow the urge to be there, that I can identify the anxiety that I'm feeling and take care of myself in a way that doesn't involve, sugar, spending money that I don't need to spend, any of those, sort of numbing, buffering behaviors. And sometimes when you're getting started with this work, it can be a little bit of a struggle to identify what would be a kind thing for me to do here. But it's really incredibly useful. So I might, choose to go for a walk. I might choose to, take a bath or sit and read or do some yoga or call a friend or do any number of other things that are taking care of the way that I feel, and they're not derailing my bigger intentions, right? Whatever those intentions are, whether it's not to have a lot of clutter in the house, not to spend money that I don't feel like I should be spending, not to eat food that I don't really need and I'm not hungry for. How can I take care of myself in another way? And when you start doing, like I said, it may be a little bit difficult to identify, well, how else would I take care of myself if I'm not going to turn to sugar or Netflix? And you might have to sit down at a time when you're, not deep in the throes of your anxiety or your disappointment, and really write down a few things that you might do to take care of yourself that are in alignment with your intentions. So, like I mentioned, it might be going for a walk. It might be that friend that you can always count on when you're in a difficult spot, or your sister. It might be, planning something intentionally to happen that's pleasant on a Sunday afternoon or evening, right? If a family dinner would feel good, if having a date night would feel good, if planning a walk with a friend in the evening after dinner, any of those things that could be intentionally put onto your calendar so that there's something good that happens there, and not just the anticipation of going back to work. So there's, of course, more opportunities in order to make your work day better so that you're not having this dread. But I hope you will consider starting this work now with helping yourself to feel better now. When we are talking about burnout and overwhelm and the stresses of the work that we do, of course, there are many ways that we can feel better, but sometimes we just need to start with something that feels good, with something that, adds more than it subtracts, right? Something that, is not too difficult, that doesn't involve talking to your boss, something that is doable. And of course, you may need to invoke some help here, right? You may need to talk to your spouse or your partner. You may need to have a plan with a friend. You may need to look at your calendar in advance and put those things on there intentionally in advance so that you can have a really good time before the start of your work week. Then, when you are in that space of looking for ways to feel better, it's easier to approach the work of making your work life better. And of course, like I said, there are many opportunities to do that. It can feel challenging when you're in that zone of burnout and it feels like you just need to keep your head down and keep focused and one step at a time, otherwise you might burst. I get that. But building in good little intentional things now will allow you more bandwidth in order to be able to do that work, whether that is making it so that you can chart as you go through your day, making it so that the inbox is not this lead weight dragging you to the bottom of the ocean, right? Making your patient encounters easier in some way, being able to set boundaries around your time so that you're not constantly being interrupted or always hours and hours later getting home than you intend. So that is an important bucket of work. But if you start with, again, some of these things that are going on in your personal life that add to your enjoyment and take away some of the stress and the negative feelings and the sort of hiding from your emotions, then the rest of that work becomes easier. I hope this episode has been helpful. I want you to really just imagine what it would be like if you are currently experiencing that sort of Sunday afternoon, evening dread. And again, whatever day of the week that makes sense to you, imagine how much better your day and your week would go if you got to really enjoy your time off. If you knew that the time before work was still restorative instead of being filled with dread and anguish and trying to sort of buffet against the oncoming storm. What if you could just enjoy that time? If that appeals to you, please listen to this episode again. Write down the steps so that you can start to practice this. And of course, if you need help, if you want help, please reach out to me. I would love to have a discovery call with you, which is also called a mini session, where we're able to talk about where you're getting stuck on some of these challenges and how we can make things better. there really are so many strategies to help. And sometimes you need the guidance of a coach to actually bring it into your life. For so many of us who are used to, sort of pouring all of ourselves into other people, into our work, into our patients, into our families, we might need a little guidance in order to really make it real for ourselves. And that's exactly what coaching does. That's exactly what you get when you work with a coach. And so many of my clients love working with a physician coach specifically because, as you have heard, I have been there and I have been in the position that you've been in. I understand the work, I understand the struggles, and I'm exactly the person that you need to help guide you through this process. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever day of the week you are listening to this program. If you'd like to reach out about getting more help, please check out my website, www.healthierforgood.com. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you'd love to leave a rating and a review, I'd enjoy that too. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll check with you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Ending Physician Overwhelm. If you've learned something today or felt moved, please share this episode with a colleague and be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode yourself. If you'd like to know more about me and my coaching practice, you can find more information at www.healthierforgood.com. Until next time, take care.